Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. I'm Lauren Milojevic, the Director of Marketing and Business Development at Simplify Solutions. Today, we're excited to have our partner and VP of Solution Delivery, Beth McBreen, discussing and demoing SAC financial reporting and the P&L structure. When the webinar concludes, a short survey is going to appear. If you guys could please fill that out, we'd really appreciate the feedback. It helps us, make the next webinar better. So please feel free to reach out to Beth or myself after the webinar with any questions. And now I will hand it over to Beth and she can get started.
All right, thanks, Lauren. Thanks everyone for joining. As Lauren mentioned, today's topic is really around, maybe more of a functional topic around the P&L report within SAC. A topic that is typically a key decision when we go into projects, when we look at specifically projects that are utilizing SAC for financial reporting. This is usually a topic that arises, right? How, based on the structures that you currently have available in SAP, or it doesn't necessarily have to be SAP, it could be any ERP or solution that you're working with. But looking at that, what are our different options that we can take? So we're going to talk about that today. And as I mentioned, just recently through one of my customers, went through the same process, right, of evaluating the different options, looking at the benefits and drawbacks of each option, and how we would actually build that in SAC. Coincidentally, my peers at Simplify, this was a couple weeks ago, were all going through that same conversation with their clients. So we looked and thought that this would be a appropriate topic to maybe share with a wider audience. So that's going to be our focus today. And again, thanks for joining. Real quick, just a couple slides on Simplify if you're new to our webinars or new to our company, understanding our company. So just quickly an introduction I'll give on us. Talk about, if you're new to SAC, SAP Analytics Cloud, just a very high level slide or two that talks about the solution in general, right? What its strengths are, what we focus on. And then really getting into the meat of our conversation, right? Looking at how we would build the P&L structure in SAC, our different options and paths to get there, and kind of a more of a decision tree. There's a lot of different considerations, and the thing with it is there's really no right answer. It's really the answer that aligns closest with your business and how that you report your P&L. And so we'll go through what those options are. We will also cover off in a live demonstration one of those, primarily one of the options that is typically our recommended approach through many of it. Again, all based on what your source data looks like, certainly, but again, we'll kind of walk through that and I'll show you some examples directly in SAC and what those differences are, right? So you can hopefully take that away from our session today and understand better, what that might look like for your company. So real quick, if you're not familiar, Simplify Solutions. So we are a niche firm, I'll say, in the space of analytics, consolidations, planning. Our team primarily comprises of obviously a technical team, but primarily our functional team. We're all have finance backgrounds, whether that's working within corporate finance for a number of years, MBAs, CPAs. So we come with kind of an overall finance background and knowledge. In addition to that, kind of our wheelhouse, our bread and butter really is focused around the what used to be, still existing, is a BPC, business planning and consolidation solution, as well as the last 6-7 years really focusing on SAC as more and more companies start to adapt and adopt this solution into their overall landscape. So those are really our two other focuses. We focus on group reporting, data warehouse cloud, some of those other solutions as well. We have offices in Chicago as well as Montreal, and but certainly we're definitely doing business worldwide at this point. So as it relates to those product specialty areas. So myself, I am a client partner and solution architect here at Simplify. So this topic is near and dear to me as I'm responsible for going through a number of different design and architect sessions with companies. This topic is something that always comes up. One of the areas that I feel like Simplify, kind of how we separate ourselves maybe from others is our prepackaged solutions. So being able to take or content, one of the things that we like to do from our, numerous projects that we do every year is we evaluate, what's something new that we've done, what are areas that were maybe more advanced at a company, or was a special, or we learned, with new functionality that was released. So we're constantly taking and evolving existing content as well as creating new content. For example, some of our newer content that we don't have on here yet is things around inventory planning, right? That we'll be releasing as well as a prepackaged solution. But what these do is it gives your company kind of a acceleration point, right? So allows you to have already predefined templates. We have business rules, calculations, dashboards, and visualizations, where again, the ability to kind of stand up a model, for example, like an HR planning model is done in a matter of weeks versus, a matter of a couple months. So that's really the intent, in addition to, again, setting ourselves up, our background in finance and kind of our functional knowledge tied to these prepackaged solutions, really help for a smooth implementation. All right, so if you're new to SAP Analytics Cloud, just real quick, a couple slides. This slide pretty much just wraps it up. I think probably most of you at this point, usually if you're joining the webinar, have a little bit of background or knowledge on SAP Analytics Cloud. But if not, again, it's core is looking at its functionality that allows you to do kind of the BI visualization, right? Dashboards. You have the planning capability. So some nice functionality that we're not really going to focus on today, but from a planning perspective, right, being able to do the top down and having the automated disaggregation, a lot of the version value driver trees, so a lot of nice simulation, workflow, all those type of capabilities embedded into SAC really make the planning experience a lot easier, a lot more user friendly. The predictive capabilities, so we have, SAC includes predictive, guided machine learning and discovery, as well as application design. So this really aligns with whether it's a dashboard, whether it's a planning template. There is, if the self-service graphs, visualizations, or templates don't necessarily suit your needs, the application design allows us to get, 99.9 maybe % of the way there, right? So if there's specific areas that we want for it to look exactly like you want it in terms of a dashboard, for example, those are some of the custom design elements that we can use in SAC as well. All right, so again, uses it through Chrome or Edge is how I can access SAC. And there's a lot of different capabilities as far as connections, right? Whether I'm connecting just from a source SQL table to connecting directly to S4 with live connections, real-time data updates. So connections to success factors, Concur, right? There's all different sorts of connections that we can make from an integration standpoint that make the overall usability, again, of SAP Analytics Cloud very good. Okay, so that's kind of the general understanding, right, of what SAP Analytics Cloud does for us. One area that I didn't really call out here, which is primarily what we're talking about today, is reporting. right? So just again, just to highlight from a financial reporting standpoint, we have capabilities to do things like bridge reports, right? So these are fairly popular among our clients, especially. We've built numerous and have prepackaged solutions as it relates to some of the bridge reporting, right? PVM calculations. So again, those type of calculations and bridge visualizations are available in SAC. A lot of times we'll see that married with kind of a standard financial book, right? We have kind of our monthly financial statements that we're going to distribute, having those books available. And then just to have, another slide, just kind of, again, standard reporting. So we're really gonna focus in on the P&L today. Whether I think some of my examples that I have in the live demo, I have a couple different versions, whether we're doing things at comparison to actual to forecast, whether we're looking at a consolidating type P&L report where we're looking at it by consolidating companies or profit centers. We'll kind of show you some of that flexibility as well. So we're going to focus on really the conceptually around how we build the P&L or what our options are. And then, as I mentioned, we'll jump into a demo and show you, some of the key components also of just reporting within SAC. All right, so let's talk about P&L. So typically, when we go into a design session or we start to have design conversations around financial reporting, again, if this is a requirement of SAC to be able to have that output of the reports within the solution, we start to look at, okay, well, what are our requirements for that P&L? We look at what the importance is. So just kind of, again, these are just examples of some that are probably more reoccurring, right? When we have these conversations from client to client, a lot of these that I picked out, kind of cherry picked, are probably the ones that come up the most. So some of it is related to number one, is really the usability, kind of relates back to the usability a little bit. So, when I look at my P&L, am I looking at that as a published print ready report that I'm just going to review and maybe change some filters, right? Change a time period. If I'm looking at a comparative view, maybe change my entity or my business group from business group. And then am I going to utilize a separate report to be able to do more of that analysis, right, and drill down? Or do I want to look at my P&L and be able to drill all the way down to my GL account from that summarized P&L view? That's a consideration, and some companies feel more strongly than others on whether that is a requirement. When we look at also how we can create a P&L, we look at it based on an account-based P&L or a functional area-based P&L. So the answer, if your company does not use functional areas, is typically pretty straightforward, because most likely you are using a chart of account structure that has separate accounts built in for your cost of goods sold as well as your SG&A. For those companies, again, more and more, the direction is leading towards a lean, what might be called a lean chart of accounts, where if I use the example of salaries, right, where we would just take and have one salary account, and then we would derive where that is placed or where that's identified as either a cost of goods sold cost center or an SG&A cost center, right? And so that the derivation between account and cost center identifies which functional area. So is it a cost of goods sold functional area then, or is it an SG&A functional area? So this one is probably one of the more important, and it's, again, usually an easier answer if the company does not utilize functional areas. If you're moving down the path or have moved down the path of we are operating with a lean chart of accounts and we're utilizing functional areas, then this topic of conversation becomes more relevant, right? Then how because the data now is not in a singular format for SAC. Now we're dealing with 2 fields, and how do we treat that? Okay, and then always, what we look at also is how we're maximizing the end user's view on things, again, the overall usability and adoption of the tool. And most importantly, we don't want users, we want an easy way for a user to come in and say, if they're responsible for building a report, that they can easily grab a hierarchy and say, here's my P&L, right? And I can look at that and now I can drag and drop my P&L structure, and I can drag and drop my, maybe time or whatever I want to see in my columns. And we want to really eliminate as much as possible the risk that somebody would pull in something that could yield incorrect results, right? So that we're always looking at too, to make sure that that is kind of safeguarded in a sense, that we're lessening that risk. Some companies also look at traceability. Okay, so when I say that, and we'll talk about this with the different options, but in some cases, some companies will take functional area, and we will take account, and we'll concatenate the 2 together. And so what that's done now in SAC is that's created a unique account for, again, if I use that salary example, I have a unique salary account for cost of goods sold. And maybe I have 4 or 5, not this one, but to keep it simple here, with the example, I have 1 account there, and I have 1 account for salaries in my SG&A. And now I've changed the account to be 6,000 C for my cost of goods sold and 6,000 S for my SG&A, right? And so now when I go back and I try and pull up in my S4, my SAP system, I'm not going to have a 6,000 C account. And in fact, if I want to be able to tie that back, I have to make sure that I have now what the 6,000 account is, as well as the functional area defined back into my source system, right? And so this, for some companies, is important that that is not the case, that we want to be able to easily trace back. We don't want to have to, train our users that we have 1 account in SAC and 1 account in SAP. So again, just a consideration as well. And then finally, obviously low level of administration. So with several of the different options that we're putting forth, there's, again, trade-off as to how much administration is required then in SAC. So, and again, these are just a few of what I would consider probably more reoccurring requirements when we go in and we talk about what that looks like and define what those requirements are going to be for the P&L. But again, there's typically usually a list of about 10, 15 that we will work with. Okay, so those are just some example requirements that we are always thinking about. And so really it kind of goes back to, when we look at kind of from a decision tree standpoint, there could be lots of intermediary steps and decisions to be made. And so this is a very summarized view that at least drives us to really 5 different options that I want to talk through in the next slide, and then again ultimately show you a couple examples in SAC. But really, again, if we start by, is your P&L structure account-based? And so again, you'll see this, I have examples in the demo, but when I say account-based, if we use SG&A, very simply, I've got, when I open up my SG&A total, I will see totals for, like my T&E expense, my people expense, marketing expense, versus if I have a functional P&L, I'm going to open up my SG&A and I'm going to see those functional areas. I may see selling, I may see finance, innovation, IT, right? And now I'm viewing this by functional area grouping and not by account. So, so there's a decision point on which view, and it's also okay to say, well, we want both views. But if you're primarily are looking at what you have today, and you're trying to decide what's going to be this, be able to replicate it, our business looks at things based on an account-based P&L. then okay, then we move forward and say, all right, we need to know, we know that the requirement is going to be account-based. Whether if you use ERP, excuse me, if you use functional areas, then if you're not using functional areas, as I mentioned before, it's an account-based hierarchy, account dimension in SAC, and it makes things fairly simplistic. When you are using a functional area, and now you have this process of a lean chart of account and as well as a functional area, then we look at, okay, well, are you going to create those duplicate accounts? Even if you are using functional areas, you have a decision to say, well, we have an option to say, well, you know what, it's better for us if we did have a singular account dimension, if you will. And so we would rather add those to our chart of accounts, right? And actually expand that out. Then that brings us back to being really an account-based only. But when we look at the option that where we're not going to do that, right? And we're going to keep that lean chart of accounts, but we still want to have some traceability, then we look at what we call reporting rules in SAC, what we're calling basically our reporting rules in SAC that is developed within the account dimension itself. If we're not, again, we understand that we're going to create these accounts unique for potentially our reporting and planning system only, right? We're able to kind of decouple the two. In that case, then really we would look at potentially option 2, which is where we're going to take and concatenate functional area and account together, and be able to have that, again, singular hierarchy and grouping within SAC that way. Without those, so if you're saying no, we are, our P&L is based off of more of a functional view, then we kind of look at, you know, have they been defined to align with the P&L? So what I mean by that is that functional areas, typically, if you haven't created them to follow kind of your P&L structure, they may only be related to expenses, right? You may only have functional areas that will align and store a functional area to maybe your cost of goods sold and your SG&A. But in order to create a functional area based only P&L, then I have to have in my source system a functional area for revenue, a functional area for non-operating expenses, right? So now we have to make sure that we create functional areas for every line item essentially on your summarized P&L, right? And some companies absolutely do this as well. So if that falls into that case, then we can basically drive the P&L in a summarized fashion based off of functional areas only. And then there's a secondary report that allows for more of a drill down analysis capability. If you do not have that, you may have functional areas, but they're only really aligned with your expenses. In SAC, what we'll actually show you is we can, again, kind of create the best of both worlds using these reporting rules. And that's really what we're gonna, again, we'll be able to show you here when we get over to the live demo. But basically what that means is now we're assigning in the account dimension, I'm able to create a functional view of my P&L based off of some rules that were identified within the account dimension itself. All right. Okay, so I know there's a lot on this screen, and I'm going to just highlight each option. You'll see that I have kind of the green box circled around option 3 and option 4, because this typically, again, kind of merges the two together. Maybe, again, best of both worlds, allows us to have using the reporting rules that we're calling them in SAC, allows us to have a view of an account based as well as a functional area based. There's definitely drawbacks to this option as well, and that's why I say that, you know, we don't necessarily go in to any project and say this is the way that you should build your P&L. It's really that's why we look at all how you're doing it today, how you're going to want to do it tomorrow, and then what your options are and what makes most sense for the company based on what those requirements are. And so here I've basically structured what some of the benefits and drawbacks will be of each option that was in the original last slide. And I've mentioned a couple times, so just kind of moving left to right. Option 1 is that option where you would go back, whether it already exists, where you have separate accounts, or you would make the decision to go back and add those into your chart of accounts. And again, benefits there really bring us back to it's a singular hierarchy grouping in SAC. And so now I'm allowed to create a full P&L, and I can drill down in that single hierarchy all the way down to my account. There's a lot lower complexity with this solution. I would say as far as loading data in, we're not transforming anything. It's one for one. You have that full traceability back. And again, is probably, in an SAC standpoint, the usability to create the P&L and overall kind of simplistic way to maintain the hierarchies, right? So you're not having to maintain separate formulas or things of that nature. Where you see some drawbacks, and what potentially could be a significant drawback is the impact to the chart of accounts. And now we're kind of pushing the training aspect away from reporting to, those that interact with the GL, for example, right? And now having to post entries and know which salary account to have to use, right? And so the risk where things get posted incorrectly absolutely is an impact, and a potential risk. So, maybe perhaps myself sitting, if I was only sitting in the seat of caring about reporting and caring about end state reporting, I would say, I would maybe choose option 1 every time. But I understand, and it's fair to look at things more holistically and how that impacts and would impact potentially, downstream as well. So, and how that, so those are, definitely some things to consider if you were to, kind of build out an entire account hierarchy with individual accounts for those areas. Option 2 is the option that, again, these are all options that we've actually implemented at customers. So option 2 is fairly common as well. It allows for actually transformation while we're in SAC. So what that means is that your source system may have functional area, it may have account, or will have account, and it gives us the ability to then concatenate on the way into SAC, creating a singular hierarchy or a singular account view that will now have, as I mentioned before, if we can take that example of our 6,000 salary account in SAC, I'm going to look and I will have a unique account called 6,000C, let's just call it for cost of goods sold, and 6,000S for SG&A. So that gets us to almost the same result as if it was account-based only. So now it's really account-based, but it's only an SAC. So that ends up being a viable option, especially if companies aren't, functional areas available, and that's how things are stored in the database, but maybe not looked at specifically. Maybe that they use their cost center hierarchies more versus functional area viewing. So there could be other considerations there as to why concatenation is the best option. And so some of the drawbacks, there's, as mentioned, we have now unique accounts that exist only in SAC. The other drawback potentially with planning is we have to make sure that if you're planning for cost center planning, for example, we're using one account for if you're selecting a COGS cost center versus an SG&A cost center. So there's a little bit of consideration on how those are built, how the planning templates are built if you're also using this for planning in addition to your financial reporting. And then finally, if you have a multi-model landscape, maybe you have a view for your consolidated results, maybe a cost center model, maybe an sales and margin model that may have your COGS information. Every model that you would create, that transformation is going to be required to the extent that obviously you have the P&L accounts in there. So that is also a drawback in my mind if you're not working with, maybe 1 to 2 models. If you have multi-models, this is an option that would require that. Now you're moving away from a low level of administration to more of a medium level for sure. Option 3 and option 4, this is, I also highlight these because I'm going to show you this in the demonstration, but this is what basically we're using reporting rules, or we're calling reporting rules in SAC. Allows us to restrict our P&L line items within the cost of goods sold and SG&A areas. It allows us to also create multiple hierarchies. So what we've done for companies is we may have hierarchy 1 that might be account-based, and hierarchy 2 that might be functional area based. So again, this is definitely an option for companies that say, well, today is account based, but we may want to move to more of a functional view in 3 to 5 years or something. This gives flexibility to that. There could be companies that want to view it both ways, that they view it one way for, certain reporting, management reporting, and so again, there might be a couple different views there. So what this does is allows you to drill down same way, but it's not going to allow you to drill down to GL account. And I shouldn't say it won't. It can allow you to drill all the way down to GL account, but the consideration of performance and the consideration of maintenance really come into play there. So typically what we recommend when we use this option is, and you'll see that in the demonstration, is that we will allow P&L drill down to a summary level. So this may be drilling down 1 or 2 levels from your summary P&L to give you, again, some additional details, but really then we recommend jumping to a separate tab within your story that would give you more of that full analysis view. This option then allows for no custom fields, no transformations. We are truly just pulling in 1-for-1 your lean chart of accounts, and that's another benefit here, is that it keeps your chart of accounts lean, intact. It then allows for, it doesn't necessarily, as I mentioned before, restrict you from viewing that functional area view. And also aligning with that requirement of the user adoption, right, allows us to easily be able to create or pull in that P&L view so that we really lessen that risk of users, reporting off of incorrect values. Some of the drawbacks is that, again, this is only accounted for in your SAC environment. So if you're using S4, central finance, group reporting, right, or any source system, well, I would say if you're using, for example, if you're also utilizing group reporting, this is more important because there are separate reporting rules. So things, if you're looking to kind of make the reporting rules more simplistic across your landscape, where you may have additional rules. So that would entail, if you had a separate consolidation system, for example, they're going to be duplicated. There's just generally more maintenance involved with this option, right? Because in the more maintenance, there's more maintenance involved, the lower you want to go with your reporting rules. So if you want to expand down 3 or 4 levels, that means that anytime a new account is added, depending on where it falls, if it's not part of the hierarchy or the grouping that is already established in the in the reporting rule, then again, you have maintenance. So now you're looking at every time an account is added, you need to make sure that it gets into the P&L reporting rules. So there's some drawbacks based on the decision of how low you want, to drill down in your summary P&L. There's also limitations, and I'll try and show some of that as well as it relates to the to planning. Again, kind of circling back, many companies that are using this for reporting are also looking to take advantage of the planning capabilities in SAC. So there is some top-down limitations when using this. And then for option 5, this is really, again, if your functional area is, you have basically everything aligned, you have functional areas for every line item of your P&L, then this is typically the option that we'll move to. There's no drill down. So typically, unless that is the case for your company, I don't usually recommend option 5. So if we come in and yes, this is exactly how we built out our functional area, then that's perfect. Then we go and we build your P&L this approach, and then we have a separate tab that gives you all of the drill down, because your functional area view will be more of a static view. There are complications in SAC that as it relates to signage. So signage will be incorrect. There is, again, some specific rules or calculations that have to be done on the face of the stories to be able to prevent incorrect signage. And then again, anytime that you decide that you want a new line on your P&L, if you're doing a functional area base and you decide that you want to break something out or again, show something new, that has to go back. A new functional area needs to be created first. And quite honestly, I don't know that that's the best approach sometimes when we look at whether we should be opening functional areas just for the sake of your P&L reporting. All right, so kind of just summarizing that option 3 and 4, and then I'm going to jump over and show you what I mean and what that looks like in SAC. But really, option 3 and 4, as I mentioned before, if we have customers that aren't specific one way or the other, right? We know that we're adding accounts and we've got account based, or we've got our functional areas aligned and we're going functional area route. This is kind of, if we don't have a clear path, this is usually one of the decision that we land on, right? And so it allows us to the financial reporting with the lean chart of accounts, functional area dimensions, right? So we have one set of accounts that are shared across, and then you have obviously your functional area groupings that are really organized by organizational tasks, right? Sales, admin, so on and so forth. And then you have your cost centers that are assigned to those functional areas. The difficulty that we see, right, is that we've talked about here, and just kind of summarizing, is that the account dimension doesn't provide that split out alone, right, unless you have that account based. So we have to look and say, well, really our total COGS is expense accounts plus those cost of sale functional areas, and our SG&A are expense accounts plus those SG&A. And I just talked about how the functional area results in that reverse signage, right? So when we look at our solution, we say, well, again, if we don't have a direct path on account or functional area, we look at utilizing these reporting rules to really derive those the COGS and the SG&A totals. It gives us the ability to keep that chart of accounts intact. We don't have custom transformation in SAC. And at least gives us a drill down to a summary level on the P&L, and then allows us to kind of use that secondary report or other for more detailed analysis, right? So it allows us to have planning capabilities as well, using formulas, which is pretty cool in SAC, kind of a neat functionality. But there are some limitations at some of the more summarized levels. So again, Typically, our recommendation is to utilize these reporting rules, and I'm going to kind of show you what they look like so you can see how that may or may not work. And again, if we have companies that are focused and know that they're account-based or know that they're functional area-based, then the decision is somewhat easier. It's really when we get into kind of a discussion around maybe we don't know or we're not strongly leaning one way or the other, that we are able to utilize this solution. So, all right, I'm going to flip over to our demo here environment just to showcase some of that functionality and what that means, right? I've just talked a lot about the different options, and you might be saying, that's great, I'm more of a visual person. So I will, before I actually talk about the reporting options themselves, I'll flip over to this report. That's a pretty basic report, but all I wanted to call out here is that if you're going down the actual based and you've updated your accounts so that you have a full chart of accounts that includes separate accounts within your COGS and separate accounts within your SG&A, this is where you basically would have the expenses where you can expand into, if I click on and expand, I will expand all the way down. And if I actually change this so that you can see ID and description, you can see that on this P&L, because it is strictly account based, it gets me all the way down to my GL account number, which is the 61001. All right, and so I'm able to, no matter how many levels I have with an account-based P&L, I can start very summarized, and I can continue to click all the way down until I get to my lowest level here. So when we talk about, and that aligns with really that option 1 or option 2, right? So whether it's account-based where you're updating the accounts, or whether you're concatenating the two together and loading that into SAC that way, this view, you get this answer that allows you to have just one column that, and again, drills all the way down till you get to this account level. If I toggle back now over to my more print-ready defined report here that we put together, these are established and set up with what we call reporting rules. And what you'll notice here, and what we're calling this is our account-based reporting rule P&L. So what we've done here is we basically have, again, kind of a standard P&L format. You'll see if I expand on my SG&A expense here, right? If I go ahead and open that up, you'll see that my expense account, what's underneath here are account-based, right? So they're not functional areas. I've got, people expenses, T&E, office, so on and so forth, right? So these are just some examples that we put together for our demo. But the point here is that it's driven by account. It's also the important piece here is you'll notice that I have no longer, except for people expenses, I could expand on people expenses a little bit for one level further. So this is where I was talking about, we have a summary P&L where we may be able to expand 1 or 2 levels down. And now when I go, okay, but I'd like to know exactly by expense account, now my T&E expenses. Right now, I actually have to flip over to another report to do that analysis and say, okay, let me look at my T&E expense by functional area or further, right? So this gives me a level, but basically what we're identifying is more of a summary P&L with a summary drill down, and then I would have a separate tab that would give me more analytical, more detailed analysis drill downs as well. Okay, so this is what we do as far as the reporting rules, and keeping it to this level. So you may ask, well, why can't I have now a drop down, right, where I can expand on T&E expenses here, and you just create those reporting rules another level? This is where I was saying it's absolutely possible, but when you start doing that, you will start to lose some functionality on being able to plan at these higher levels, as well as the maintenance involved, right? So if I'm able to expand on people expenses, and then here I may have 5 accounts that roll up to salaries and bonus expense, Now, every time that I add an account, I have to make sure it gets pulled into my reporting rules and my P&L. If I know that I'm adding another account and it falls within this roll-up, I should be able, it will automatically be assigned or aligned with that grouping, right? So there's a little less maintenance when we keep it at more of a summarized level, right? So so that's one consideration and one view, right? Now, if I wanted to, I could take that same view and I can now apply, because you'll notice in that first view, it just kind of summarized and concatenated basically my account and my cost of goods sold together, right? So here, you know, I can see that I have T&E expenses, but it doesn't visibly tell me, okay, well, where, you know, where do those expenses exist? You know, so I can now have a separate view. For example, I may have a separate tab here where I could come in and say, okay, well, my T&E expenses for my SG&A, now I can see by individual functional area where they're at, my actuals, right? And then you can see it, there's some nice stuff on this report where here I'm just looking at a consolidating report by company code, right? I can also do this by profit center if we had that level of detail available as well, right? So we can kind of make those distinctions. But again, the main point here trying to call out is that we would be able to have now expanding just this view of a singular view, now incorporating functional area as a secondary, right? This is more of an analytic view, right? Versus being able to have our first view where we can hide these carets, you know, for our expand options so that it looks more of a print ready, versus now we get into more of an analytic view where we've got some drill downs, some additional dimensional drill downs to work with. The flip side is that also utilizing the reporting rules is that now this looks similar, right, to our first view in our account based. But if I open up this SG&A expense, now I don't have things like people expense, T&E expense, professional service expense, right? Now, here are my functional areas. I have selling, marketing, general, admin, HR, finance, so on and so forth, right? So these would be your functional areas views. And so now with this option, you kind of have, again, the ability to do both or one or the other, but you do have the ability to structure this both ways. So again, we have companies that are just starting to transition from more of an account-based P&L to looking at things, to looking at their P&L based off of functional areas here. And so, so this gives them that flexibility, right? And where they can start to look at it in two different ways. So again, this kind of has a different view here versus our accounts where we're just based off of accounts. And then, like I mentioned before, you end up now with more of a detail or analytical view, right? So now I can see where I may want to switch things up where those might be in more of a presentation or print ready format. Now I can look at my expenses by functional area, right? So I could make these like a little bit, I guess, there we go. So I can look at, and maybe I want to expand, make this very summarized here to start with. So you can see here, if I'm just looking at actuals, I should point out that I could have pointed out, I guess, if you looked at the two income statements, the numbers do tie as well, right? So we are able to look at both views. Here, this gives us more of a detailed view where I can see all of my expenses, then I can see my functional areas, right? So now I can get down to that account level, right? So now I can expand. Here's where I can expand, whereas in that first net income, that first P&L, I could only go down to that summary level or only saw T&E. Then I have to flip over here and say, okay, I can see now by account, here are my T&E expenses. And if I wanted to see even further, I could expand that out and I can see my airfare by each one of my functional areas. And you can see as I'm clicking around here as well, the chart here on the right-hand side has been designed to update based on what I'm clicking on and what I'm viewing in the report. So anyway, that is more of the approach that we take when we're looking at which option. Do we want to see it by function, by account? This gives us that flexibility. You can see some of the capabilities here as far as the reporting. If I scroll down, we had another chart. It's kind of hard to see all in one that gives us a view as well. So this has been, works great for companies. I do want to be fair and just call out the drawbacks, right? And just the drawback here, really, and some of the limitation is around planning. So here we have just a separate view where now I'm looking at my P&L, same format. Now I'm in back into my account-based P&L. Okay, so here you can see, right, I've got my people expenses, T&E, and this is at a summary level, so I'm not expanding down. So here at this level where I've created my reporting rule, I can absolutely come in and take this 10 million and say I want to increase it by 10%. Okay, I do that and it automatically updates, highlights, and shows everywhere where that 10% has been impacted, because I did that in my total year for budget. Where I'm unable to do that though, let's just say if I wanted to not change my T&E item, what if I just wanted to increase in general my operating expenses, my SG&A expenses? You're unable to see this because I'm unable to do, but I promise you that I am trying to do the same exercise of doing a plus 10% on my side into this cell where it's on the summarized row, and I'm unable to do that. So there are limitations. I won't say that they are going to come out with new enhancements as it relates to this in SAC, but that is, according to current state drawback at least, that when we create these formulas, it has to be at the lowest level of the creation of the formula. So I can't enter in and say, increase it by 10% here or change the number here and have all of this disaggregate, unfortunately. But it does, again, changing it here will automatically go back and actually change it into my T&E. I think if I come back here, this is just actuals, so I'll have to see if I can do that here and show that. Typically, I wouldn't be updating actuals, but just to show that here. So now you can see the 10,797, which is my T&E for my SG&A, right? That updated directly from when I went ahead and updated this in my planning template. So this view over here is actually the account itself, or the accounts itself, right? So so it takes a formula and actually spreads it back to the individual accounts, which is really neat too for a system to be able to do that. So again, that is not what I would consider a full limitation. You still have the ability to, but the limitation is if you want to plan using this format, right? Could you absolutely plan at, at this level, where we have total expenses, and then you can decide whether you want to plan SG&A, and view this by these different groupings here. Yes, you have that capability to do it by individual or by summarized level of total expenses. But again, there are some limitations as it comes, or drawbacks as it relates to some of the summarized levels that you do only in this reporting view, right, of the P&L. So most companies, if you ask me, well, then what do they do, right? We usually have a view where they can summarize the expense accounts themselves, where we have some of that capability. So, all right, I am going to, that pretty much concludes the the demonstration and really what I wanted to showcase in some of the functionality here with the P&L. I understand that, again, some companies, it's a pretty straightforward decision. And some companies are also looking at, and even as they may jump into or maybe starting their S4 journey or other, and are starting to explore, maybe haven't used functional areas in the past and are looking at using them going forward. You know, these are definitely some considerations that you will have to look, you know, from an end state. So you may be designing a lean chart of accounts and functional area design in your ERP system. And then, you know, really though, you also need to look at what that means from an end state reporting. Really, if that's SAC, if that's BPC, if it's really any solution, regardless, you need to look at, because if you want more of a print ready or singular type hierarchy that you see here, that then requires one of the options, right, that we talked about today. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation today. Certainly, if you do have any questions, feel free, as Lauren mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, to reach out to myself or Lauren and be happy to talk further about it, exchange, you know, information or some other examples, stories as far as what other companies are doing and what we've built for them as well. So thank you all for joining and have a good rest of your day.